Here I am with Meera Syal, and we're going to talk about her book, The House of Hidden Mothers. Would you say it's a trilogy with the other two? I mean, there's quite a few other little stories that you've written, but is it part of a trilogy?
Not really. I mean, it's obviously some of the same themes I'm interested in, Indian women, mothers, daughters, aging. I mean, so there are some repeat themes, but it's definitely a standalone book because the subject of surrogacy is, obviously a huge one.
I mean, the actual story for it came from, you came across a documentary about surrogacy, was it? And then how did the other, I mean, there's so many subplots and stories, and they all sort of like are very, very strong on their own as well. How did all those other ones come about then?
Well, so you're talking about the subplot of the parents who have a flat in India.
Which rings very true to
very common NRI experience. Well, that was inspired, I should explain the subplot, that the main woman, Shama, her parents, like many of our parents, sent their money back home and bought an apartment in Delhi, which they're hoping to retire to. And surprise, surprise, one of the relatives moves in and won't leave. And so they spend 14 years in the courts trying to get this flat back. So that was taken directly from my own family, inspired by something that happened in my family, which broke my father's heart. And for me, I really wanted to write about it, A, because it had had such a profound effect on us, B, because I knew so many NRI families that had been through exactly the same thing, and C, because it is the most massive betrayal, and it destroys all your ideas about home and where you're going to retire and your family and who you can trust. And for my parents, by the time they actually got the flat back, they'd been spent so many years fighting it, and they got older, their happiest retirement years were over. And they couldn't even use it anymore. I
mean, with Anita and Me, the main character was a girl who was 12 years old, reaching her teens. And then with Life Isn't All Ha Ha He He, the main characters were in their mid-30s. Do you see your next novel going about 10 years above that?
Maybe.
Yeah?
I mean, you tend to get interested, I suppose, by the stage of life you're at. Although I haven't, very luckily, had fertility issues. I have had so many very close friends and relatives that have been deeply affected by infertility issues. So I know that is a very big issue for women of a certain age. Of any age actually, and surrogacy is certainly an option that more and more women are taking up, and India, of course, and I didn't know this, is the world centre for surrogacy. So it seemed to me that choosing to write about this was also a great metaphor for the relationship between India and England. Is this exploitation, or is it just a trade, just free trade between the countries? And who are we to judge somebody that is desperate for a baby, or in fact that wants to hire their womb out because that amount of money will change their lives? So it just threw up a lot of interesting issues about our relationship with India and England, and women's relationship with their own bodies.
The way that it's described in the book, it does sound like it's a massive business that's booming there at the moment. Is that how it really is at the moment?
It's the biggest in the world. $4.5 billion.
My God.
Because there are so many poor, fertile women. You see, there's the West has got wealthy, infertile women. India has got poor, fertile women. That's how trade works, right? That's how capitalism works.
But then this way actually, benefits everyone.
It's terribly exploitative. I mean, it depends
how you look at it.
Exactly. And I've tried to open the debate by showing it from all sides. So you really see it from Shama's side, who is the woman who's hiring the surrogate. You really see it from Mala's side. And I hope that at the end of it, people will really, it'll have provoked debate and thought rather than making a value judgment on whether it's right or wrong.
Another thing that you've subverted, which hasn't been done before, is the generation gap between mother and daughter. Usually you sort of like see it that the parents are the more conservative ones, the more cultural ones, the ones who are sort of like trying to bring up their kids and saying, oh, you need to learn about your religion and your family and all of this, and you've kind of subverted that here in that, the mother is the one who's...
Bit of a hippie chick.
Yeah, basically, and, the daughter's sort of like on a bit of soul-searching and trying to find it. Is that, would you say that's inspired by anything, or is that something that you've experienced yourself, or?
Well, I'm a bit of a hippie chick too, this is true, although I think I hope I'm a bit more sorted than Marla. Well, it's something I've observed, amongst my friends, that, women in my generation, we grew up as feminists, we grew up questioning a lot of the traditions. And in a good way, because I think there are some traditions that are just abusive and bad and shouldn't be continued, and that they're not actually traditions. They just have the name of tradition. But forced marriage, abuse of women, these aren't traditions. They're just bad habits. But I've seen in the generation coming up that a lot of them, because they've been brought up by very liberal, questioning parents, are actually going, hang on, don't throw everything away. I'm really curious about India. I'm really curious about my history. I feel very far away from it because you weren't born and brought up in India. So, and I see that third generation in some ways becoming a bit more conservative. Or on a more positive note, a lot of them actually going to India to find work and to actually return to India and do the opposite journey that their grandparents made. It's a really interesting reversal. So I sort of wanted to explore that as well. Because, learning to live in India is a big thing. It really doesn't work the same way as here. You want to get your electricity fixed or get your kid into a school or, you know what I mean? There is a completely different way of doing things. This is what happens to the grandparents in the book. They go to India thinking, we'll get our flat back and it'll be good old the justice system.
No spoilers.
No spoilers. But hey, the courts in India don't work the same way as everywhere else, and that's something they find out the hard way.
You see that India's progressing in so many ways, but is that corruption still there?
Yeah, it is. And it's something that I think the younger generation are very on. I think there are two huge issues for the younger generation in India. One is corruption and the other is sexual violence, as we saw by the amount of people that took to the streets after the Delhi bus rape. And that anger is still continuing, quite rightly. But I think the younger generation are hugely ambitious and they know India could be a superpower, truly. But without sorting out these two issues, it isn't going to happen. These are the two issues that really need looking at.
I mean, is it a safe place for women? Now, I mean, there was that documentary, India, a dangerous place for women to live. And would you say that's very true to word? Or is it somewhere that somebody from the UK or anywhere could, a lady could actually go over there and make a life for herself?
Well, I think statistically some of that is true. There's, you look at the statistics, it's frightening. I certainly don't take any risks when I go to India, but then I'm a visitor, you don't know the country as well as somebody that lives there. You talk to other women that live there and they go, okay, well, it's fine, you just have to be careful. And actually, I suppose we have to remember that this is a problem in every country. It isn't just India's shame, it's everybody's shame. But there are certain ways of thinking that is very endemic to our culture that we have to unpick. The dowry system is responsible for so many evils, because if you have a dowry system and you think the minute a girl is born she's expensive, that's a problem. How is that not going to lead to abuse? How is that not going to lead to female infanticide? So there are other things we really have to look at too.
Another thing that you pick up on in this, which hasn't been explored yet, are the oh, you wouldn't understand my culture kind of thing that Asians sometimes have towards when they're going out with somebody who's not Asian.
That's right. Yeah.
Is a misunderstanding that a lot of Asians have of just like that kind of sensitivity of just like my culture, I understand it, you'll never get a grip on it.
Yeah, I definitely see that I have a lot of friends who are in mixed race couples and very happily, but that sometimes there comes a point where they go, you're Indian, you just don't understand. And it usually frustrates the other person because they go, try me. Hey, I've married you. Why don't you try me? I might understand. I think one of the big sticking points is as our parents get older, a lot of us take our parents in.
The other thing I was going to ask, with the adaptations of previous novels, Manita and Me became a film, and now it's also become a theatre play. Do you see The House of Hidden Mothers going anywhere next?
The rights have already been bought.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, it's for a television series, so hopefully, if all goes well, we should be filming that sometime next year.
Fantastic. Has there been any casting announcements?
Oh, no, it's far too early.
No.
Far too early, but the rights have been bought, so it's going to hopefully have a life somewhere.
If you were doing it yourself, who would you have?
I don't think about that at this point. I mean, it might be made in 5 years' time, in which case I'll be too old to play any of them. So I'll just wait and see.
I don't know. I think maybe the main, you did it with Life Isn't All Ha.
Yeah, I was the right age then. It just depends, but I mean, the best person should do it. I don't mind. There's so many terrific actresses around. It certainly doesn't have to be me. I would go for the right person more than anything.
And have you been intrigued at all by stepping over to India, doing the whole Bollywood scene or Indian cinema scene at all?
Well, there's some really interesting directors coming up, sort of the new wave of films. I mean, Lunchbox was, just a beautiful movie. And even things like Three Idiots, you look at something like that and you go, this is really smart filmmaking. So I can't see myself dancing around a tree, never have. And certainly in Bollywood mainstream films, I'd only be offered Matajis, wouldn't I? Which I'm not really interested in playing either.
Not necessarily. Well, Sri Devi's made a good comeback with English of English and stuff.
Yeah, so smart, complex roles for older women, definitely I'm up for that.
And final question, seeing, goodness gracious me, is well, let's just say superb. It's just like, what can you tell us about the next reunion special?
Well, it's coming out in September, I think. This one's a slightly different tone because it's part of an India season, so a lot of our sketches aren't specifically to do with the relationship between India and England. So we have a takeoff of Blackadder, about Indian soldiers in the trenches. We have the Coopers are back. We have an Mr. Everything Comes From India song. So there's some good stuff coming up.
Excellent. I'm sure it'll be just as great as before. So, yep, this was Meera Syal for the NRI. Thank you. This is great.